Hey, what's going on out there? It's Dan. This is Moonshine Talk. Uh, I figured I'd keep going on about my background in wrestling because a few people seem to enjoy that, and I kind of the way I figured it is that I do a couple videos. If people enjoyed them, cool. I'll do more. If people didn't enjoy them, then I say, well, it's not a big deal. It's not like this is something I'm doing professionally or for profit, so it's not a huge deal. Just something to keep my creative juices flowing. Uh, just try to share some fun stories. Hopefully, people are entertained by it. But anyhow, regardless. So, like I said, last time I was talking about my background, how I got into wrestling, how I wound up in it professionally, and some of what I did. So, I just figured I'd go from there, kind of chronologically, follow the bouncing ball down the road. And I always preface it. You'll probably hear me say this. I'll preface this a lot. Like I was a nobody in wrestling. I didn't do anything special. I wasn't in the big companies. I didn't make a lot of money through wrestling. I always had a full time job the whole time that I did it, which I'll probably explain somewhere down the road. I've had the same job for almost going on 24 years. But yeah. So anyhow, all that being said, yeah. So I wound up at after growing up watching it, enjoying it, really catching the bug early on in life. I ended up doing some research while I was in college and found a few schools, reached out to them. The one that suited me the best seemed to be Malenko School of Wrestling in Tampa, Florida. Um, so I went there, met up with Dean. He explained everything to me as far as training there and all that good stuff. So yeah, we'll just get into what it was like there. It was great. I mean, I have nothing but good things to say about training there. I think maybe the entire time that I was there, which was I started there in late October, early November of 1997, and I trained there from till December of '98, which was around the time that the school closed down. Dean had committed to a full time job. He had re signed with WCW at the time. He was also having his first kid at the time. So, and I mentioned this before, but he just decided between of all the things he had going on in his life, this was the thing he could do without the least. So the school went away. We actually, I'll kind of bounce around a little bit, but we shared a school with Steve Kern, who's a famous territory wrestler from the 80s. He was in WWF as Skinner in the 80s as well. Became a road agent for them, producer. He eventually took over Florida Championship Wrestling when WWE moved their entire facility from Deep South Wrestling in Georgia to they became Florida Championship Wrestling here in Florida in Tampa, and he took over the whole production until they moved it all to Orlando. It became NXT, and that's kind of the history there. But yeah, we had a school with them. We would split time. We would start early in the late evening, and then Kern's boys would come in and they'd work into the night. And yeah, Malenko's is a cool place. It was very highly regarded as far as a place to train. It started in 1980 when Dean's dad, Boris, who was a regional wrestler in the 60s and 70s, he ran it with Dean and his other son, Joe, who I don't know Joe too well, but every story I've ever heard about him, he's a total badass. He's not somebody that you ever wanted to mess with. You always got warned if he showed up to the school, you were getting stretched that day. And that's how it was. They try to toughen you up that way, teach you to respect the business, teach you to learn how to shoot and be able to protect yourself to a degree. That's kind of the beginnings of the place. A lot of people came out of there. At that camp, you had Kane. He came out of there. Sean Waltman, X Pac, came out of there. Fred Ottman, who wrestled his tugboat, and later in WCW was famously the Shockmaster or I should say, infamous. Gentleman by the name of Al Perez came out of there. Bob Cook, who a lot of people, if you're not a hardcore, don't really know who Bob Cook is. He to me, I say I'm probably legendary. He'd probably go, what the hell are you talking about? But he was a journeyman wrestler. He's very well renowned and highly regarded within the industry by people who know old school wrestling fans and old school people. They know who Bob is. He's got one of the best punches in the business. And that was even brought up in Mick Foley's one of his books, I think his first book. Jim Ross speaks very highly of him, but he was another guy that trained there. Trying to think who else of note. Uh, Dave Heath, Vampire Warrior. He wrestled as Gangrel in WWF. He was a Malenko guy. A few ladies. Molly Holly, Nora, who I'll probably mention a little bit. She trained with Dean. She trained with Dean while I was there. I worked out with her a couple of times. She was cool, super nice. She's one of the politest people and nicest people in the business that I ever met. In a lot of respects, she's probably too pure for wrestling, but she was very successful. But she was trained between Dean and Macho Man Randy Savage, and she got a job with WCW and went on to WWF when that got bought out, and she had a pretty good career for herself. Like I say, she's cool. She was always very cool. One of my old roommates, Dave, she's really good friends with him, and she used to come over to one of the apartments that I used to stay at when I used to stay with him. She used to come over all the time and hang out with him. But like I say, nice. Can't really say too much other than that. I guess I'll just say a funny story about that as I'm bouncing around chronologically here. We're in the ring, a bunch of us. We're working out. We're doing some sort of lucha libre spot, and we do a thing where like it's like a tackle drop down variation. Go for the leapfrog. You land on the leapfrog, roll back. The person's coming off the ropes. They're gonna roll through, do a 3/4 roll through your legs. Then you go in, you stand up, face off. You do like a pass through, all sort of, just the lucha libre stuff, that kind of thing. And when she was working with me, she does the roll through after the leapfrog that I did, and she headbutted me in the nuts. Which, to this day, I'm sure that if she remembers me, if she recognized me, she'd probably bring that up because we were out one day at a show, and she's saying hi to everybody, giving everyone hugs, and me, she knees in the balls. Not legit, but she kind of pantomimes it. So that's like kind of our. That's that's kind of our that's our story. My stupid anecdote about her. But yeah, she was cool. But yeah, a lot of people came through there, and it was very highly regarded. A lot of Japanese wrestlers, because Dean and his brother, his dad, they all wrestled in Japan. They all had names over there. Dean and Joe were both trained by Carl Gotch, who's a world-renowned shooter, and Japanese wrestlers they respected him quite a bit. So it was a really big thing to be a Japanese wrestler and come to Malenko's and train there. So uh, that's actually not that way, but that's Phyllis Lee, the lady who I mentioned last video, who I'll mention again. She always handled out of state people coming into the school. She would handle anyone coming from outside of Florida, like myself and a bunch of others. She would handle the foreigners coming in to train at the school. So she was like consigliere is not the right word, but she was like the intermediary, the go between the school and anyone trying to get in from outside of the Florida area. So that's who I went through to get into the school, and so on and so forth. I'm repeating myself. So yeah, it was a huge place, and it was very very highly regarded. So yeah, my first day there, I started working out with Jeff Bradley. He was the guy who handled the beginners classes. Jeff is, again, I mentioned this before, but well renowned, well regarded guy by people who know him and who know Jeff, know the business. Uh, he did lots of enhancement talent for all the major companies. He's been around the world, very well traveled, seasoned veteran, grizzled veteran. He's a cool guy. Anyone who knows Jeff, they got a cool Jeff story. So he started working out with me, and to this day, I can tell you, like they gave me a sheet. It was a bunch of moves that you were going to learn, and you had to check it off. You had a checklist. And first thing I learned first day, besides they go through you do your rolls, you learn how to take a bump, you learn how to protect yourself without killing yourself. So you do that repetitively till you get the hang of it. And then they taught me headlock takedown, wing lock takedown, and a schoolboy. And that was my first day of practice. Then they kick you out of the ring after doing that with it a few times, making sure that you can do these things without dying. And then they kick you out of the ring, bring you back, go over it, add something new, and we would slowly but surely we would go through the list, start learning various takedowns, start doing this and that, and holds, counter holds. things of that nature. The school itself, it was a place where you learned the technical aspect of pro wrestling. You didn't There wasn't a promo class. There wasn't a class where we sat down and studied footage. Uh, it's definitely, as far as schools go nowadays, they're a lot more advanced than they were when I was going. They treat it more like a business, which is really cool. Where when I went, you just kind of learned how to do the moves, which is something Dean explained to you from the get go. Is that he would teach you how to wrestle. That's what he was there to do, to teach you how to wrestle. He wasn't there to get you matches like a lot of schools and the promoters through the schools would tell you. He would always tell you, I can get you a match. It's going to be here in this ring, but I'll get you a match. And I mean, I had plenty of matches in that school. So, he was right about that. But yeah, so we did that, did all the, started doing that for the first month or so. Uh, had an apartment, had a roommate. The roommate was kind of a scumbag. He bailed on me within a month of being there and stuck me with like at the time, a $700 two-bedroom, two-bathroom apartment that I couldn't afford on my own. And he had already kind of hosed me for some money at that point. So I got stuck. And I had a job. I was working. I ended up getting a job at Busch Gardens, and I was there for pretty much the whole time that I was here. And so I had to scramble. And there was a point in time where around Christmas time, my parents helped me out. They gave me some money to help pay the rent, but it was getting touch and go there, and that's where I briefly mentioned it last time. Dean was at the school because it was around this time that he took a break from WCW. At the time, he was in an angle with Chris Jericho, and they did a whole thing where Dean lost a match. They did a post match interview. They asked him where he went from there. He said home, and that's what he was doing. He was taking a break from wrestling. He was focusing more on the students because where I came in, he had just finished one of the classes, which was a bunch of guys who were they went to WCW and did some work there, but by and large, it was like there was the Shane brothers, Mike and Todd. They went on to WWF. Guy CJ Spencer, he ended up being Tony Mamaluke in ECW. He went to WCW for a bit. Uh, He's WCW, then he went to ECW, excuse me. And then he eventually, when ECW got rebranded in WWE, he ended up getting on their programming. So, as far as guys that I trained with and I knew, he was probably the biggest name to come out of there besides the Shane brothers. Jet Jaguar, Brian Burnick, he was another guy who was there. He was in WCW for a bit. He was one of the main dudes in one of the local companies I used to work for, and he's a super cool guy. He's very fun to hang out with, very funny, very talented. But he kind of just the stress and rigors of wrestling got to him pretty early, so he had to retire pretty early, and then he started doing a little behind the scenes stuff. But he's another guy. He wrestled. He had a good time doing it, and then now just has a 9 to 5 job, day to day life. Just everyday working guy, just like a lot of us. So yeah, that was it. I'm sorry, I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit, but yeah. So when that was that class. There was a couple other guys. I'm thinking like Chad Collier is another guy who was there, who a lot of people won't know, but he ended up having a little bit of success, a modest degree of success in the business. Um, bunch of other guys who nobody will ever hear of, kind of like myself, other than if you go on YouTube and start talking about it. Uh, and so I was in between classes, so I did a little bit with them. Then the school took a break for the holidays. They came back. They were having all these guys coming in, so that's why Dean took a break so he could focus on that. So I was scrambling. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if I was going to have to move back home, if I was going to have to, if I just wasted a bunch of money coming down to Florida, spending money to train at the school that I was going to lose. So Dean sped run me through a lot of stuff where normally he would have taken a lot more time with holds, the counter holds, learning the actual mat wrestling. He started moving me closer to now I was learning body slams and hip tosses and running the ropes and stuff like that. So he was really kind of trying to get as much into my brain as possible before I eventually had to leave, which fortunately didn't happen because we had a guy who came to the school. His name was Dave. He introduced himself as C4, and he said that was his name. He ended up wrestling as that, but he told you right away that he was C4, and that's who he was. So he was staying at what was Vampire Warrior Gangrel. He had a house where a lot of the students would stay. He was there, had a room. The room was already paid for by somebody else who wasn't around. He just kind of vanished, got hurt and vanished. But I guess for whatever reason, they didn't want, for liability reasons, they didn't want to have him there. So they end up. Dean talked to him one day, got talking to him about me when he gave Dave his speech about coming to the school, and he mentioned me, and I was in the ring hitting the ropes or doing something like that, and he was telling him about this guy. He because I didn't have a car, I didn't have a bike, I didn't have nothing. I just pretty much I lived in one part of town. My job's on the other part of town. I would take the buses and walk everywhere. So he was very. I think he was impressed by the fact that I was, as he put it, I would walk through hell and back just to train in Malenko's, which was true. I mean, I would at that point I was doing anything. I was trying to live my dream. So I would have I would have walked through hot burning coals to get there every day, and a lot of times I did, and not literally, but you get the point. So we ended up talking. We ended up becoming roommates. He moved into my apartment. He took one of the rooms, so that took some of the pressure off as far as rent and utilities, all that sort of stuff. As time went on, we got a couple more roommates as more students came into the school. A guy named Jason, who he came from South Carolina, and before him was another gentleman by the name of Kevin. And Kevin is my buddy. He ended up becoming one of our roommates. Became one of my best friends in the world. He was my tag partner for years. We wrestled countless matches. Eventually, what I want to do is I'm going to get a bunch of my old stuff up online, and you'll see a lot of stuff with either me tagging with or competing against Sean Christain. And he's one of these guys that I really think if he wasn't as small, and sorry, Kev, but if his mouth didn't get in the way sometimes, he would have gotten further along in the business because he was naturally one of the most talented people I've ever been in the ring with. The first day I met him, he came into the school, drove up to the building, walked up to the ring, got on the ring, and he leapt over the top rope, did a 3/4 roll through into the ring, like the old Mexican style or like the Eddie Guerrero style way of rolling into the ring. And he just looked at everybody because you weren't supposed to do that. You're not supposed to just get into the ring without permission. And he just goes and he does a rope flip and then lands up to his feet and I just want to see if I could do that. And we were like, and everyone's kind of looking at me because I was the one who'd been there the longest, and they're all like, "Well, what are we gonna do?" I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do about this. And what do we beat his ass? I mean, I don't think Dean would like that. So, so yeah, he was a cocky bastard, but he was very talented. He knew he was talented, and that sometimes that kind of impeded his progress, impeded his success. But like I say, we're great friends to this day. Uh, and he was another guy who was there. Like I said, I'm bouncing around a little bit, but kind of speeding this up a little bit, so I'm not spending an hour talking about Malenko's. But yeah, at this point, so I was there for a while. Jeff had come and gone because he had a day job. They had another trainer there by the name of Mike Marcello, who was a local independent talent. He did a lot of enhancement work for WCW because back then that's what you did. You had a lot of guys. If you were successful, then they would hire you to do enhancement talent work for WCW, possibly WWF, and it was just if you were good enough, that's what you did. And so a lot of the guys back then, you hear me say a lot of if I mention a lot of names, a lot of these guys would do job matches, what they called them on TV for the major talent that WCW had signed. Mike was one of those guys. He was friends enough with Eddie Guerrero that where Eddie loaned him. He gave him some of his old wrestling gear. It's a white and red set that Eddie used to wear on TV. It was a tights with a singlet, a butcher singlet, and so Mike used to wear that a lot. Mike was very talented. He was kind of he was an interesting fella. I'll probably get into him a little bit later, but he didn't so much have a hand in training me, but he was always there. But I always tell everybody the main people that I credit with training me were Dean, Jeff Bradley, and then here and there, I would say probably another gentleman by the name of Pepe Prado. He was another guy that had quite a hand in training me. These were probably the main guys who were talented, experienced veterans, and they took the time to work out with me. Um, so yeah, that was a lot of it, and then beyond that, it's a lot of boring stuff as far as just the day to day of doing the moves, learning the techniques, balancing that between having a job. I've got, if this were a professional thing, I'd probably have pictures and crap all posting up on the side here, what have you. But this isn't a professional thing; it's just me ranting into a camera. Uh, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. I met a lot of cool guys, a lot of veteran people. As time went on, it got to a point where I was, where you start to feel it, and you start to, as you do the stuff more often, it starts coming together, and then one day it clicks, and then next thing you know, it's like, oh shit, I'm doing this. Like this is something I'm actually doing. I'm actually kind of good at it, and so I had a lot of fun there. I had a lot of matches, a lot with Kevin. Worked out with CJ quite a bit. There's a few other guys I'm forgetting that I'm not mentioning. There was a guy there who his name was Matt Dante, and he was cool to work out with because he was super flexible, and his big thing was always putting you or getting put into a Boston crab hold and trying to get your feet to touch the back of your head, which if you weren't as flexible as he was, could be kind of painful, and you hear things popping. But it was kind of he was a cool guy to work out. He was a lot of fun. He's another one. He never really made it in the business, but he wrestled and he was a Malenko guy, so he at least has my respect in that regard. Um, Trying to think of some funny stories, some funny Dean stories that I can share with you, because a lot of people don't know. Dean's a very funny guy. He's got a very dry sense of humor, and you have to be careful with him because like he's so serious, he's so stone faced that you don't know when he's joking. But once you realize when he's joking, he's super funny. But I know one time I wasn't there for this, but Dave C4 he wanted to take a picture with him, and he asked me if he'd put him in the Texas Cloverleaf, which was Dean's finishing hold at the time. So he takes the picture, and before he grapevines the legs, before he hooks his leg through to put him into the rest of the hold, or not put his leg, before he grabs his legs to lock him up, to like grapevine them and turn him over for the cloverleaf, he just like spreads him. He has him spread eagle, and he like sticks his tongue out like. And they take the shot, and Dave's on the ground. He's laughing and just having a blast. So he's got this picture. Dave gets it developed, and the first thing he does is he asks him to sign it because, of course, he did. And so Dean, being how he is, he writes on it, "Hmm. Thanks for the good time, Joe Malenko." And so we all had a blast. We all laughed at that. And I think a couple days later, Dean realized what he had done, and he's like, hey, can I get that picture back, please? Because I don't think he wanted winding up on eBay or whatever was available at the time. So that's just kind of an example of his humor. I know one time, it's kind of a stupid story, but it always stuck with me. Is he was teaching us a cravat, a 3/4 headlock, where you'd hook the guy and then you kind of take your arms and you twist, and it was a way to cinch on a person's neck. So he's showing us, he's got everybody gathered around, and he liked, for whatever reason, he liked using me as a tackling dummy of sorts. He always used me as the test subject on a lot of these things as I got further along in the school. So it's real quiet, and he's got everybody surrounding him, watching him very, very, very diligently, and he starts hooking the hold. And then all you hear is, that's my neck. And everybody pops. Everybody just starts cracking up. Dean's laughing his ass off. So it was cool. I mean, I had a lot of fun being there. It was great. It prepared me for wrestling to a degree because I think I probably could have learned a little bit more about etiquette and how to behave with the older guys, which over the years, and I'll mention it in the future if enough people watch this, is that's what kind of I would get myself into trouble quite a bit with a lot of the older guys, and when I was out on the road, not conducting myself in the fashion that I should, that would have got me a little less heat with people and probably would have helped me propel up the ranks a little bit further. And I never like was a dick to anybody, but I'll get into that at another time. But yeah, I mean, I could probably go on for hours and hours and hours of training at the school, but that was kind of like that was what it was like being there. I'm just trying to think of anything else before I sign off here. But yeah, I was there for a year, probably 12 months or so, 15 months or so. Uh, I'll probably save when I go into talking about my first match. That's when I'll get further into what it was like being there towards the tail end, because that's kind of around the timeline of when the school started shutting down and I started wrestling professionally. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm just babbling at this point. I'm going on for almost a half hour, which is crazy. Hopefully, people watch this for more than 2 minutes. But yeah, if you like this, do all the things that people tell you to do with these sorts of channels to help the growth and all that sort of thing. And if you want to hear any more of me ranting about wrestling, then the view count and all that sort of stuff will let me know. But anyhow, thanks for now. Take it easy. We'll talk with you soon. Later.